Rebecca Newkirk, and I am a licensed clinical social worker, and today we're going to be talking about 3 surprisingly simple ways that you can support your loved ones who have perfectionism. So first, let's talk about perfectionism a little bit, and let's talk about where it comes from and what it looks like so that you can tell if you have a loved one who has perfectionism. So I like to think of perfectionism as coming from what I call a shame core, and you can learn more about shame core stuff if you want to look up John Bradshaw, any of his books, and one book in particular, it's called Healing the Shame That Binds You, that's really insightful and really helpful, I think. But basically, when we talk about a shame core, what we're talking about is feeling like a fraud. So just kind of like living your life in such a way that you always feel like you're an imposter. You feel like there's doom. You're dreading just the day that the other shoe is going to drop. You're just waiting for someone to find you out that really you're not as good as you seem. You are not as capable as people seem to think that you are, and things of that nature. So what can be a little bit confusing about perfectionism is a lot of the time when we're talking about it, we're sort of thinking about people who are high achievers. We think about someone who is just able to push a lot of work out, or when they do work, it is just of a really high quality because they're holding themselves to incredibly high standards. But that's actually only one half of the spectrum when we're talking about perfectionism that comes from shame core stuff. And the other half of the spectrum from shame core stuff actually looks like underachieving. It looks like someone who just doesn't trust themselves to be able to do anything. It looks like someone who's lazy, someone who gets absolutely frozen by having something requested of them or feeling like something is important that they need to do. And it ends up looking like that adult child who is still living in the basement and playing video games most of the day, and the parents are just kind of not understanding what's going on because they know how capable their child is, but the child is just kind of not feeling that for themselves. So you can see that it can be sort of hard to see in other people because as an outside person, it can look drastically different. And we kind of have to know who we're talking about and how they're feeling so that we can understand what it is that they're going through and what is driving their behavior. Now, perfectionism is not a diagnosis. It's a set of symptoms that I think a lot of the time when I'm treating people who have this set of symptoms from perfectionism, a lot of the time it's coming from complex PTSD. And we can talk about complex PTSD another time. I'm sure some of you are already familiar with it, and that's why you're watching. And some of you may not be, and that's completely fine. We're just talking about the symptoms right now. So let's talk about those 3 surprisingly simple ways that you can support your loved one, your significant other, your child, your spouse, your best friend. It doesn't really matter who it is, right? We are going to use some of the same skills to be able to support them either way. So the first one, and this is going to sound, again, surprisingly simple, is validate. We want to validate the person's feelings. We do not want to get into a power struggle with them about whether or not it's true. We do not want to be arguing. We don't want to be dismissive of the way that they feel. This can be really challenging because when we love somebody, when we look at them, we see someone who is so amazing. We see someone who's capable. We know what they can do, right? We've seen them do really amazing things. And yet, sometimes people are just really not able to see that in themselves. And so we want to do reality testing, like look at your grades, or look at how well you do in interviews, or like look at how well you're doing at work, right? We want to point things out, like people really do like you. I mean, you have a lot of friends, and everywhere you go, people want to be friends with you, and so on and so forth. But this doesn't help. It actually just can sometimes make it worse. It can sometimes make people shut down even further, or it can drive them to push themselves even harder, because we have to really remember that they're experiencing themselves as a fraud. So as far as they're concerned, if you can see positive things in them, that's because they faked you out. That's because they're just really good at pretending, or you just haven't been paying good enough attention, or they feel like they're holding something back and they're withholding this really important bit of information that maybe they can't even identify. And if you knew that, right, then you would know that they aren't really as perfect as they seem, or they're not really as good as they seem. Or maybe they just think they've been lucky, right? That's a cognitive distortion. Holding yourself accountable for everything that goes wrong and feeling like that's your fault, right? But when something goes right, then it's because of luck or circumstances, or it wasn't really that hard, or anybody could have done that, right? So we don't want to argue with the person. And I think sometimes when we talk about validating someone and validating their feelings, we don't really want to do it because it feels too much like we're agreeing with them, right? So if we validate somebody, we feel like, why would I validate that? Like, I think it's completely wrong, right? I think that they're just coming from a really weird place, and like, I don't want them to think that I'm agreeing with it. Well, here's the thing with validating is it's not actually about agreeing. And when you're validating, you can actually say right out explicitly, I don't agree with your assessment of yourself, right? And you can start there. But validating would look something like saying, this is really hard for you. I can really see how scared you are. Or this is really frustrating, and you've been struggling with this for a really long time. And I'm so sorry that you have to go through this, right? This feels really big. And basically what we're doing is we're reflecting back at them what they're saying to us, right? So they're saying, I don't want to go to an interview because I'm going to mess it up. I'm terrible. They're going to see it. I'm never going to get the job. I'm never going to amount to anything. I'm never going to be able to do anything, right? And we just want to validate, like, wow, like, this is really scary for you. You feel like this is a really big deal, and this is really hard. And then a lot of the time they'll say something like, yeah, yeah, it is. Like, thanks for listening. Like, I'm glad you heard me this time, right? So, this is our first point. Like, we want to validate, but I want to make sure that I'm talking about what the other side of this can look like. A lot of the time we end up dismissing their feelings, and that's what we do instead of validating. That doesn't work, right? Is when we're telling them, when we're arguing with them, getting in a power struggle with them, actually, like, you're really great, like, I don't know where this is coming from, they're going to experience that as like, oh, so it doesn't matter how I feel, like, you don't care. Like, great, like, I'm glad that you feel good about me, but I still don't feel good about me, and I still need to be able to process through that. Like, that's a real thing for me, and I need you to get that, right? Another really common way that we tend to dismiss other people's feelings, and this is such a big one, and it happens so often, and we mean well. We mean so well when we do it. It just doesn't have a good effect. So let's try to stop. Is we'll say something like, oh my gosh, people have it so much worse than you. This is the, like, there's starving orphans on the other side of the world effect, right? Like, think about all of the starving children in India, like, or think about all of the people who don't even have parents, or so on and so forth. That one's so big. It's so common, and it's so not helpful. The way that people experience that is really like, I don't get to have my feelings. And I can't tell you how many times I have people come into my office and sit down and look at me and say, I don't know why I feel this badly. I don't have a right to. I don't have a reason to. My upbringing was great. I'm surrounded by supportive people. I don't know what's wrong with me, right? And they'll dismiss themselves, right? They've heard that from other people so many times that they've actually internalized it, and then now they're telling me because they don't want me to think that they're ungrateful, or they don't want me to think that they don't get that they have good things in their lives, right? And they're dismissing their own feelings. And I think a lot of us know, and we can talk about more, we can talk about this more in other videos, but we need to be able to, like, acknowledge and feel our feelings to be able to move through our feelings. We can't make them not, right? Where our feelings are here already. So it's important for us to recognize them and validate them. And it's important for the people who love us to be able to validate those too. So point number one of surprisingly simple ways to support your loved one who's a perfectionist is let's validate. Validate, validate, validate. That's probably the most important one, to be honest. The second one is, again, really simple. Ask your loved one how you can be supportive. Now, this one is kind of challenging because what I'm asking you to do is put your feelings aside in the moment when you are agitated by your loved one's behaviors. Because a lot of the time you're looking up this video, you're talking about it because there's something about the way that your perfectionist spouse or girlfriend or child is behaving that's impacting you. And so when they're doing their little perfectionisty thing, right, and they're just like not, they're complaining about their job all the time, but they're not applying for any other jobs, or they're just like refusing to do anything to move forward if they really don't like the circumstance. That's more of the paralysis side. Or on the other side of that, they're like working 24/7. They like maybe write a report for work or a report for school, and they just read over it over and over and over again. It takes them, like 10 hours to do something that that they're capable of doing in 2. And that's really painful for their loved ones because they're not available, right? They're shut off. They're either like zeroed in on whatever it is that they're doing, that they're trying to do immaculately, or they're just like not available because they're totally shut off and they're not willing to do anything, which means they're not available to be in relationship with you either. And that can be really painful because it's like being abandoned, not physically, but emotionally. It's kind of like being abandoned by your other person. And that can ignite some of our own stuff. It can make us maybe like disproportionately agitated, or we can react really angrily when we really don't want to, and that's not what we're trying to do. But gosh, we just can't handle our loved ones responding like this anymore. And so we want to just shake them. We want to just like, snap out of it, like act differently. Like, I need you to be different right now. And what I'm asking you to do is not that, right? I'm asking you to take a deep breath if you can, and see if you can keep your voice as neutral as humanly possible. And in the moment, right, and also out of the moment, we can talk about that in a second. But in the moment when you're really bothered by the behavior, or when you can tell that your loved one is really bothered by their experience of the perfectionism, and it's paralyzing them, or they're getting stuck in a loop, just kind of gently, like, see if you can get eye contact with them. That's really important. See if you can keep your energy down, because they're going to feel whatever you're feeling, just like you're feeling from them, right? We're like energetic beings, and we can experience each other's emotions. Keep your voice neutral, look them in the eye, and say, what can I do to support you right now? How can I help? What do you need from me, right? And not only is that really difficult for us, but it can be really frustrating because your person may not know how to respond. First of all, they probably have very rarely had that experience of someone really calming down, like bringing their energy down, honing in, like zeroing in on them, and then asking that question. And they may not know how to respond. They may not know how to answer you, right? They may not even be able to say like, well, I need you to sit with me and just like rub my back, or I need you to just hold my hand, or I need you to just tell me I'm okay, right? Or create a cocoon for me on the couch and then move me into the cocoon and just play music that really calms me down, right? They may not be able to say those things because they haven't done enough exploration to be able to get there. But the reason that you're asking anyway, because it's important to ask regardless of whether or not they can come up with anything, is you're saying, I'm here, you matter, I see you, and I want to be able to support you through this. I want to be able to help, right? You're first validating, right? I see that this is really difficult for you. I recognize that this is really hard. And you're moving from there into, not only do I recognize it, but it matters to me, and you matter to me, and I want to be able to do something. So that's one thing, is we're showing support in a way that your loved one may not have commonly had, especially when they were growing up, right? A lot of the time we don't have exactly what we need emotionally when we're growing up. And so it's a different kind of experience for them that can be healing, especially over time, and especially if we're really reliable, independent, consistent. But beyond that, what you're doing is you're starting to trigger something in their brain where they're saying, what do I need? What's going to help? What could bring me out of this in this moment? This is a really hard moment for me. What could I do that might be useful? So it might start to trigger over time, and you're going to have to do it over and over again. That's really difficult. But over time, it might support your loved one in being able to sort of like get some distance, take a step back, and really start considering, what do I need when I'm in a space like this? And so I think I mentioned earlier, I just kind of said it offhand, but I want to make sure that I directly talk about this, is that sometimes the best time to have this conversation is when you guys are both in a really good place, when the perfectionism is not rearing its ugly head, when, you know, you're having a really good day. And I know I can feel it. Like half of you are like rearing back and saying like, no, like it's a good day. Like, why am I going to mess with that and like bring up hard stuff? Like, I don't want to do that. You know, I want to have my good day. I don't want to mess with it. But hear me out for a second. Just take a deep breath, listen for a couple more minutes, because it doesn't have to be so painful, and it does not have to derail your day, right? So here are some ways that you can bring this up. Let's say that you and your loved one are, you know, spending some time together and you're feeling really good. And like maybe you and your boyfriend are like going out for coffee in the morning. It's a Saturday morning. You're feeling great. Both of you have the day off. It's a miracle, right? It's possible to start this conversation by saying, hey, I've noticed that sometimes when you have X behavior, I respond really poorly. And I really don't like the way that I respond because I get mean, and I don't want to be mean. And I don't want to be short with you, and I don't want to be irritable with you. You don't deserve that. You deserve to have me as a supportive person. That's who I want to be. I love you, and I want to be here for you, and I want to be like a healing agent for you. I want to be someone who's going to help you feel better. So if you could think about some things that I could do or say in those moments to sort of let you know that I'm here and let you know that you matter to me and that I want to help, that would be so helpful. That would be so great for me. And I'm not going to be perfect. I'm going to mess up sometimes, even if you tell me exactly what to do, but I'm really going to be here. I'm going to listen, and I want to try, because that's how much you matter. Now you may have heard that the way that I framed that was very much from the perspective of, you know, I care about you, and that's why I want to do this, and I want to support you. So it's not talking about like, you know, you need to get like you need to get off of the computer sometimes. You need to like stop with the video games. Like, I need you to be more present or whatever. You know, you're not saying that, you're not attacking, you're not telling them what they need to do differently at all, right? You're just talking from your perspective. I love you. I see that you're in pain. I want to do something about that. And people tend to respond really well to that. I cannot guarantee that your person is going to respond well to that, but for the most part, a lot of the time, you know, people do respond well to being told that they matter. People like that. Okay, so number one was validate. And like, part of that is like not dismissing, right? So we're validating the perspective, we're not dismissing it. Number two is ask how you can help, right? Maybe in the moment, maybe not in the moment. We talked about how to do that. So here's number three, and this is the part that a lot of people kind of feel like, ugh, this is the hard part, and this is the part that makes me feel like a mean person, is set boundaries. This is how you can support your loved ones who have perfectionism, is you gotta set some boundaries with them, because their behavior is impacting you. And if their behavior weren't impacting you, then you wouldn't be watching this video, because it wouldn't matter, right? So they need to know how their behavior is impacting you, what is acceptable to you, what's not acceptable to you, and what you're gonna do when they're behaving in a way that's not okay. And I know it's really hard. So this is a way that you can take care of yourself, but it's also a way that you're taking care of your loved one. And let me explain that a little bit, because I think that can be like hard to see for a lot of us in the beginning when we're first kind of introduced to it. So think about it this way. Let's say that your husband, right, never does the dishes. He just never does the dishes. He goes to work, he does other things, sometimes the laundry, but you hate the dishes, he hates the dishes, and he never does the dishes. And you never say anything, right? Because, you know, for whatever reason, you just feel like this is something that you need to do, and you just don't feel like rocking the boat. Now you're going to do the dishes, and for the first, you know, probably like maybe even couple weeks, maybe even months, you know, you'll be able to convince yourself into it. Oh, he's so busy. He helps with other stuff. It's fine. This doesn't bother me. I can totally do the dishes all the time. That's not a deal, right? But over time, when you're doing all of the dishes, right, you're hunting through the house and picking up all the dirty crap, and you're trying to get the crusties off with really hot water, right? There's going to come a point where you're going to have flashes of anger. You're going to start feeling like, oh, I can't believe I'm having to do the dishes again. You're going to start to have like unconscious thoughts that are not because you're a bad person and not because you're not supportive. You're just going to start feeling really frustrated. And maybe even over time resentful, right? And I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but I certainly have, where I've been trying to be really, really nice for a long period of time in a very specific way. I'm really trying to be accommodating. And then I get so frustrated with it, and I get so upset that I'm having to do so much. I'm not even telling the other person, by the way. They don't even know that this is happening, that eventually I act out angrily at them, right? Or I'm so resentful that I'm passive aggressive. And it's so common, right? It's such a common thing. It's like, we don't want to hurt them by holding them accountable or talking about our boundaries with them. We end up hurting them by being meaner later, right? And we can, we can explore this more in future videos about anger management and how to like work with our unruly anger and ways to deal with that. But that's just kind of like a skeleton of understanding what's kind of going on. And so it's important for our relationship and to support the other person to be respectful of your loved one who has perfectionism, right? We need to set boundaries. And what that's going to look like is, let's say that your girlfriend is just not working. You're living together and she quit her job because it was a horrible experience, whatever. And at first you were super supportive, and that was great, and that was totally okay with you. But then over time, it was like, you noticed that your girlfriend was not applying for new jobs, or like not trying very hard, or not showing up for interviews. You noticed that she was kind of getting complacent, and that started getting really frustrating for you. But you want to be supportive because you recognize that it's coming from a space of her feeling not good enough. Like, she's not going to be able to get a job, or if she does get a job, then she's not going to be good in her job and she's going to get fired, or the horrible experience that she had before is going to repeat itself. So you get where she's coming from. Like, you understand she's not being malicious or lazy, but you need help and you're frustrated, and it's been a while. What this might look like when we're talking about setting boundaries is setting someone down and saying, I've noticed, right? I start with validating, right? Like, I get that this is really hard for you. I understand that you may be scared for X, Y reasons. I really get that. I want to know how to support you, right? We're going through the 3 again. Validate, ask how you can be supportive, and then say, but I really need your help. Yeah, I really need it. And that is going to look like you needing to apply for more jobs because I just really can't be paying the bills all by myself anymore. Right? Something like that. Or if we're talking about someone who is like so overproductive that they're taking on tasks all the time, and they're, they're going over and over and over the report that they need to turn in, and you're getting really frustrated because you're never seeing them, right? That's going to be the same thing. Validate. I get that you want to do a really good job. This is really important to you, and it's really scary, and you don't want to mess up. And I so hear you, right? And then ask how to support. I want to know how I can support you in getting away from the computer. I want to know how I can support you in just like editing once or twice and then walking away from it because I miss you and I need you. Your family misses and needs you. And then you're setting the boundary. So, let's make rules, or let's talk about this because I can't be having you in front of the computer from 8 o'clock at night until like midnight. Like, I need you to go to bed with me, or I need you to get off the computer. And then talking about how you're going to interact with that in such a way that's going to hold your boundary. So today we talked about 3 surprisingly simple ways that you can support your loved one who's a perfectionist. And we started with talking about what is perfectionism and where is it coming from, and very briefly went over that. And again, if you want more information about that, John Bradshaw is a really great person to look up. And we talked about how it can manifest. Perfectionism can manifest as very high achieving and overachieving and trying to be, better than everybody else, or it can also manifest as being paralyzed and not being able to take steps forward and not being able to do what you need to do because it's just so scary for you. And then we talked about the 3 ways that you can support them. So the first is you got to validate. The second is we want to ask how we can be supportive, ask how to help, right? Not only in the moment, but also in moments before and moments when everything's great. And then we want to set boundaries because their behavior is affecting you and it's going to harm the relationship. And you are going to end up potentially not being as nice as you want to be. You're going to end up not being the partner you want to be, not being the parent you want to be, so on and so forth, if you allow their behavior to make you angry or make you resentful over time. So I hope that was really helpful for you. Leave any comments or questions in the comments here, and I'll go back and I'll read everything that you write. And if you want to get more information, I will put my website in the comment section as well. So thank you so much for joining in. Again, my name is Rebecca Newkirk. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I'll talk to you again soon.